I got changed to a cook. Oh, but you know, that's fun and exciting because we get to know that we're in the stuff of life and things just happen, don't they? But there's always a flow to things, and can we move with it? That's the grace. Oh, grace, that's what we're talking about today, isn't it? The blessings of grace. I have a question for you. People that know me know I like questions. Yep. The question is this. Do we all have an understanding of what even the word grace means for us? Have we taken time to contemplate that? Because I know for many I ask, they simply just tell me what they've been told. You know, maybe through certain traditions or religions and that. But then when I ask them, what does that mean for you? And I often get this blank stare. And that's perfectly okay, but what I want to do here is talk about that for a moment. And what is this grace that we talk about? You know, we're often told that it's something that happens to us. I have a couple of quotes I want to share, just quickly. Is this the spot where it zooms out? And the first one is this. And I'm going to bring this up because I know this is a Science of Mind church. And I got a quote here by Ernest Holmes, who wrote The Science of Mind. This is actually from his original textbook. He says this, grace is the givingness of the Spirit to its creation. It is not a special law, but it is a specialized one. In other words, grace is. But we need to recognize it. It is not something that God imposes upon us, but it is a logical result of correct acceptance of life and of correct relationship to Spirit. Isn't that an interesting thought? That it's not something that is just done to us, but it's our relationship to our Spirit. He also goes on to say this, grace and truth are the cornerstones of reality. Something interesting to think about. I have one more quote here I want to read, and this is by some guy, I can't read his name, David Cook? David Church? And this is actually something that came to me this morning. I wrote it down, so I thought I would share it. And simply this. Grace is often understood in many traditions as unmerited favor for God. My knowing of grace is that of a flow of our true nature. Grace may be favor, but it is also empowerment, teaching, guidance, and the divine urge to move us to a greater expression of soul and spirit. Grace is, of course, a gift to which we are given a miraculous experience of expressing life through. Free choice and free will are aspects of grace, and the love that flows through it. I perceive grace as an omnipresent force that continually promotes us to express and grow. One might consider this way of knowing it to be divine grace. Another aspect of this could be to see that our individual part in using grace to be our personified grace, which would narrow this divine grace down to our personal choice of expression. Grace does not decide for us. It flows through us, gifting us with life-giving presence. When we are in the flow of authenticity with our soul, we are in our most coherent state of grace. Something to think about, isn't it? What is this grace that we often talk about? Or even the state of grace? It's a way of representing our expression of life as we relate to our spiritual soul and essence and the aliveness that we are. Grace is not something that we have to look for. It is something that is part of our essential nature. I think sometimes we're taught that it's not, so we think we're missing something. We all know that grace is a gift, and it's gifted to us in some way. Now, in many traditions, it's been gifted to us, and with the thought that, well, I don't deserve this. Well, I'm here to share that if you're feeling the sense of grace, you do deserve it. Grace is a natural part of who we are. It's the God presence. I remember reading in some of Neil Donald Walsh's books. Anybody ever read some of his books? Aren't they fun and exciting? I think so. One of the things he said there is the word God and life are interchangeable. Now, I want to throw in something else here, too. I think grace can be thrown into that category, too. Something to contemplate, isn't it? Because they're all gifts from the source. And what is that source? We may not even know. But that source is definitely here. But our relationship to the source is where we live. And what is gifted to us to express and feel life, that's the grace. And we are gifted with it all the time. But what happens when we resist that flow of grace? Don't we get some disturbances in our force? Has anybody else ever had those experiences? Yeah, of course. You know, it's been said that grace is kind of like the wind. You just have to put up your sail to catch it. I'm going to add to that. That sometimes you have to adjust your sails because the wind, you may be resisting it. You may have the anchor on in your boat. Sometimes we have to be able to adjust where we are so we can flow with the moment that we have so graciously been gifted to us. But like so many of us that refuse to allow grace to move through us, what do? Well, for me, for a long time, I used to say, well, this shouldn't be happening. I'm doing everything wrong. Why is this happening in the world? This shouldn't be happening. But what would happen if we were to acknowledge it is happening? And there's a grace and divine essence through it, a presence that allows it to open up and have the gift of something even more wonderful. Something truly magnificent, even in our own standards. That's the gift of grace. That's the benefits and our experience of what that can be for us. Grace is not something we have to look for. It's something that is our nature, and we're here to allow it. Think about that for a moment. How often do things come up in our life? And for me, for a long time, I used to not believe in myself at all. I would say, well, what if I messed it up? What if I'm going to do the wrong thing? What if? And so what did I do with my grace that was so nice and flowing through me and it was nudging me into the right place to grow? I was anchoring my feet down to the ground and say, I'm not moving. I don't believe in that, or I don't trust that. I don't have faith in that. I don't have all these things. So what does that do for us? It does everything for us. See, because one thing about grace, it doesn't determine our choice and free will. It is the gift that offers us to have free choice and free will. That's the gift. And if we want to choose to have a different experience, we can choose in this very moment to allow our natural grace to flow through as maybe a sense of guidance and trust it enough to take the next step. We have that free choice and free will. That's the gift of what grace offers to us. That God presence that we are, that flows through us in every single moment of our lives. But we also have the free choice and free will to deny it. Well, grace is still working, but we can have the experience of what happens when we deny it. That's our choice. And for many of us, we live there on a regular basis. And you know what? That's perfectly okay. Because if it weren't, we wouldn't be here today, would we? See, all these things, what we might call good and bad, they're all perceptions of what it is. But how we perceive it sets up our experience. But all the experiences that we have were necessary to get us to this moment. And this moment is when we get a new choice, where we actually apply our free choice and free will because of the grace that has been gifted to us. See, grace is a force. It's a natural force, and it's our nature. Now, could you imagine if there was a fish in the ocean, and we were saying, I shouldn't be in this water. What's this water here for? I shouldn't be living here. It's its nature to live in the water. And it can have all the experiences it wants. It says it shouldn't be there, but it is. I'm suggesting we live in grace the same way. It's our nature. We live within grace every moment of every day. And it's also our choice how to experience living in it. Now, we've all had those different experiences, and we can maybe not talk about the fish, we can talk about ourselves. And we can have fun with that for a moment and say, well, I live life here in this air that it's here, this oxygen. Wonderful. Well, it's part of our nature to breathe this oxygen, isn't it? But how we breathe it sets up an experience. We can breathe very shallow and we get one experience. We can hyperventilate, we get a different experience. We can do different kinds of breathing exercises, have different experiences. But still what? If we're alive, we're breathing. It's part of our nature. I just threw out those examples to give you an idea of what grace really is. It's a divine nature that moves through us that allows us to have the experience of living and expressing and choosing and loving. One of the things that flows with grace is love. They're almost like kindred spirits because they're probably two different sides of the same thing. Love and grace. Could you imagine for a moment if neither of those really existed in our world? Love and grace. What would that be like? Because if we begin to understand grace is what promotes the life-giving force that we have and the expression and the growth and all these experiences, what would begin to happen? Without grace, we're not here. We don't exist. Yeah, you may not believe what I believe, and that's perfectly okay. We have the right to have beliefs and perceptions about everything. I'm just suggesting it's part of our nature, so contemplate that. Take a look at it for a moment. Grace. Amazing grace. We've heard that twice this morning already. Amazing grace. Let me ask you this. How amazing is it to you? How amazing is it to you? When you think about your life, which is filled with that grace, how amazing is your life to you? How amazing is your own inside miracles that occur for you on a regular basis? Miracles occur every day. Do you know that? But if we're not looking for them, we won't notice them unless they really just bump up against us really hard, huh? Think about that. What do we really believe about our own selves? Do we believe that we're filled with grace? Contemplate that for a moment. If you already knew that you were filled with grace, and it was part of who you are, and you are grace-full, what would happen to your just normal motions in life? Now, we often talk about dancers. Oh, they're so graceful. What is that? It's about that movement because they're in their flow. What would happen to our own lives if we got into that flow of our lives a little more? With that grace? Would we have so many disruptions? I don't know. One thing I do know, when we're in that flow, we don't notice them as much. We start to get filled with, what's that other thing that we do? Grateful. We become grateful. And when we're full of greatness, and we're filling ourselves with that greatness that we are, that's when we know great and grace. Because the grace of life, the grace of whatever you want to call this essential nature that we are, in my opinion, is beautiful. It's wonderful. And if that's true and it's part of what we are, then we are also beautiful and wonderful and magnificent. Are we willing to look at ourselves a little more deeply? And understand the grace that is within us at every moment. Because the blessings of the grace, the divine grace, are immense. And what do I mean by that? The immensity of life, our ability to express and live, to be alive, is to allow grace to fulfill itself, to flow. Because one of the things that I know we do often, at least I know I have, is sometimes I get into a flow of life and all of a sudden I go, gosh, do I deserve this? Am I doing it all right? Am I doing it all wrong? But see, not everybody's the same as me. I now know that those are little points for me to pay attention. For me to have my free choice and free will. And say, That was my old stopping point. Do I want to move beyond that now? Do I want to have a different experience, a different expression? Do I want to be a different person? Do I want to change my last name from Church to Cook? Do I want, see, I have the free choice. And that's the amazing thing about grace. When we flow with it, we can have fun, and we can laugh, and we can have joy. But one thing I know for sure, when we fight our own grace, what tends to happen? We tend to shut down. We tend to have disturbances in our bodies. We start to hold it back even further. And then we get illnesses a lot of times. I'm sure I'm not the only one that's had that experience. We make ourselves sick. All because we don't allow ourselves to flow in that grace that's naturally ours. And we know what I'm talking about. I'm sure we all know that. We know when we hold ourselves back. And often we have that little voice inside of us that says, come on, you can do it. Take the next step. Then we have this other voice inside of us that says, no way. See? We've trained ourselves well that way. But grace really moves through us. Even though it's the immense force of the universe, it whispers to us. Because it knows that it's given us this free choice and free will. And it's not here to tell us what to do. It's not even here to tell us about right or wrong. It's here to give us a propensity to live and grow in life and express who we are more genuinely from our soul. To align ourselves authentically with our spirit, our essence. See, grace is that essence when we move in alignment with our soul. And we begin to allow that authenticity to move through us into life. In those moments when we're really on that flow, that's when we're most coherent with the state of grace within our lives. And that's important. Begin to trust that flow more. Flow with it. Trust it. When we do, we open up our intuitions. We start hearing this little whisper voice inside of us that says, yes, we can do it. So I'm going to leave you with a couple of thoughts on grace. And it's simply this. First of all, it's not separate from you. It's like in the thing we do about Namaste. We're not even separate from each other. But let's make it more personal. Grace is not separate from you. It's not separate from me. It's a force that moves us into life, to growth, to experience. And if we begin to stir up our lives a little bit and start taking a look and say, wow, let's let it move through us. Let it be who we truly are. Let us live in that flow of our own immensity and live the grace that was gifted to us today.